Hey, what's up guys? Kolst here. In this video I want to talk about the Darkmoon Races mini-set, which is coming out tomorrow as of recording this video. I'm going to talk about the cards mostly from an arena perspective and also just kind of the updates that they went through today. So get right into it. So the first good thing is it comes out tomorrow, the 21st. And there are some legendaries and epics, but fortunately for pretty much everyone, they decided to make the entire set purchasable for only $14.99 or 2,000 gold, which I think is good news. And before I go into the cards, I'm just going to talk about the cards. The other thing to talk about for Arena is that this is also going to be coming with a rotation. So there's going to be a few sets coming back. Boomsday Project, Ungoro, One Night in Karazhan, and Old Gods Leaving. So I'm going to have another video where I'm talking about some of the cards, significant cards from these old sets coming back. But otherwise, I just want to talk about the cards from the new set. First one here is Spellfire Deadeye. This is a 2-mana 2/3. Your hero power costs 1 less. I should mention there's a bunch of dual class cards here. So this is a Hunter Demon Hunter card. So in Demon Hunter, that just makes your hero power cost 0. So that's pretty amazing. And in Hunter, makes your hero power cost 1. I think that'll be more significant constructed because there are more synergies in that game mode. But overall, I mean, it's a 2-mana 2/3, so fine card. Not going to break the game or anything, but very good. You'll see a lot of it. Next is Resizing Pouch. Discover a card with cost equal to your remaining mana crystals. That's interesting. So that makes it so you can kind of look for specific things. This is a Hunter Druid card, so you can look for Swipe on turn 5, you can look for Deadly Shot on turn 4, or Unleash the Hounds maybe. That's a really cool card. It's probably not going to break the game, but again, very interesting. You can look for Overgrowth on turn 5 also. Yeah, there's a lot of things you can do with that. Next one is a Druid Shaman spell. Guidance. 1 mana, look at 2 spells, add 1 to your hand, or overload 1 to get them both. It's kind of like a 1 mana discover a spell, which would be very good, but you also have the ability to overload 1 to get both. So then it'd be essentially like 2 mana discover a spell. I feel like this is a card you wouldn't want to play much on curve, but later in the game, it would just be extremely efficient. It seems very good, and it's useful that you get the option. So sometimes you might want 2 spells, but one of the 2 spells you're offered might just be completely useless, so you just choose not to pay the overload anyway. So and other times if you're Shaman, like with if you want to play Eye of the Storm next turn, you just won't take the overload, right? So, you know, it's a very useful card. It'll be something we'll see in a lot. The next one, an interesting one, Imprisoned Phoenix. 2 mana, 2/3 dormant for 2 turns, comes out. It's an elemental also, by the way, with spell damage +2. This is probably, I'm just going to say it will probably get nerfed. I'll predict it right now. Not really for Arena, but you can OTK just off of this card pretty easily. I was thinking about it because you're not even limited to 2 copies per deck. You can OTK with this on turn 8, possibly in Arena. With all common cards, by the way. You play 3 of these on turn 6. That makes turn 8 Fireball, Frostbolt, Frostbolt exactly 30 damage. So, there's going to be some highlight reels coming out of this card, so yeah, that'll be an interesting one. But I expect it'll probably end up at least costing more mana or something. Maybe they nerf the spell damage later, we'll see. Next one, Keywarden Ivory. This is an extremely strong card. This is the first legendary we're talking about. 5 mana 4/5 Battle Cry. Discover a dual class spell from any class. Spell Burst, get another copy. So obviously, since you're discovering a spell, it can activate itself if you play it later. But the ideal situation with this card, you could just play this with Brain Freeze on turn 6 or something. It would just... This is an extremely strong card. I mean, at worst, this is like basically a Steward of Scrolls, right? It doesn't have spell damage attached, but, you know, this card's very, very good. It's definitely a premium legendary. The next one, interesting, Nitro Boost Poison. I should mention this is in... I should mention the classes again. This was in Shaman Mage. This one is in Mage and Rogue. This one, which is a Warrior Rogue card, Nitro Boost Poison. Give a minion +2 attack, corrupt, and your weapons. So this is basically like a... very similar to Tinker Oil, which used to be a card. I don't remember the exact name of that card, but it was the same thing. It buffed to a minion and your weapon. Since that card required you to combo it, this card just requires you to corrupt it. So corrupting it is much easier. This card should be very good. It's not going to be like the best card ever, but because it does require you to actually equip a weapon, you can't do this super early, but this is a very good card. It's a very strong effect for just 1 mana, so it's a good card for sure. Next one we have here is Barricade, which is a Warrior Paladin card. A weird one. 4 mana, summon a 2/4. If it's your only minion, summon a second one. So 4 mana 2/4 is absolutely unplayable. That would be a bad 3 mana card. But if you get 2 of them, that's pretty good, right? I don't know. It doesn't seem like this is going to be the craziest card, because even honestly, like 2 2/4s for 4 mana, it's not like that still trades down to a Yeti, right? So it just doesn't seem like this card is going to be all that worth it. It's not unpickable, but it's just, you know, especially in Paladin, you want to be playing on board anyway, so I don't think you're going to see too much of this, but you'll see it. Next one is Rally, Paladin Priest spell. Resurrect a friendly 1 cost, 2 cost, and 3 cost minion. Probably not unplayable, but also probably not the most useful thing. Especially in Priest, you often don't have a full 1, 2, 3 curve, so you're not even going to get the full effect, and then this card is just kind of bad. In Paladin, it's more likely to be pretty good, but again, like if you just whiff any spot on your curve and then you have to play this, it's just bad. So I don't know. Occasionally good, but usually not that great. Next one I think is one of the strongest cards, and I'll just say right now, I think this card is going to be the Salas Darkmoon of the set, as in being underrated, and it's Hysteria. This card, like Salas Darkmoon, I think is much less conditional than people are seeing it as. So, describe the card. This is a Priest Warlock card. Choose a minion, attacks random minions until it dies. So I think what's going to be so strong about this card is its flexibility. It's not as good. Obviously, they printed Mass Hysteria in the past, which was more of a total board clear. And this card will probably be weaker and constructed because it isn't Mass Hysteria, and it isn't going to deal with just an obscene board. But in Arena, where boards are much more contested, this card seems absolutely insane. Because a lot of times if you fall behind and your opponent just has, like, you know, 2 moderate-sized minions, this is basically just a ramming speed, and often a better ramming speed. So it seems extremely good. Imagine your opponent has a 5/5 and a 7/7 on board. You can also just play a 2-drop yourself, like play a 2/2. And then use this on the 7/7, and it basically gives your minion rush. So, and it's a board clear. So this card is just extremely flexible. And the other thing is you can even use this super defensively, like play a big minion and use Hysteria on it. And if your big minion has, like, especially if you give it like Apotheosis, then you can just like basically give your guy Wind Fury Rush and heal for 1,000,000. So there's just so many things. I think this card's can be extremely flexible and good. Let me see. Next we have Lucky Soul Hoarder. 3 mana 3/4, battle cry, shuffle 2 soul frames into your deck, corrupt, draw a card. I mean, that's just extremely good, right? Even without the corrupt, but with the corrupt, it's insane. It's a Warlock and Demon Hunter card. Yeah. I don't think there's much more to say. It's a 3 mana 3/4 worst case, but with at least Soul Fragment upside, extremely strong. Alright, now we move on to the individual classes. Illidari Studies, 1 mana, discover an outcast card. Your next one costs 1 less. So they're already power creeping the card. Well, there is a reason to play the tutor outcast card, but in Arena, this card is just way better than the tutor card. Now, discovering outcast card is interesting because if you play on the same turn, this is great because it will always be outcasted immediately. But if you're trying to use this to ramp out the effect, it's going to be extremely awkward because it's going to go onto that spot in your hand where it'll be really hard to outcast. So this card's extremely strong, I think, once you have the full mana to play whatever you're going to want to get. So you're going to want to be able to play Skull of Gul'dan or the 4-drop or you know, Fellblade or the 5/4 that summons 1/1. You're going to want to make sure you have enough mana to play any of these that you're going to want. But then this card's extremely good. It doesn't seem like it's going to be as good played on turn 1. Unless you have a really cheap hand that you know you're going to expect to be able to empty out. Yeah, it seems pretty good. Next one is 4 mana 5/6 Fell Saber. Can only attack if your hero attack this turn. So since this is a Demon Hunter card, obviously it's not that expensive to attack with your face. You could get abused a little bit because people could just play a taunt and then you're kind of forced to hero power the taunt and kind of waste it. So you can kind of, this card definitely has some downside, but it's a 4 mana 5/6, which often really won't have that much downside. So I think it's fine. It's not going to be the strongest card of the set by any means. All right, next we'll go into Druid. Another 3 mana 3/4 Dreaming Drake. This is a Taunt Dragon with Corrupt gain +2/+2. So again, a 3 mana 3/4 Taunt is great. And if it's a 3 mana 5/6 Taunt, that's even better. Just honestly an extremely strong card. Don't think there's much more to say about that. But there's a little more to say about this next card, which is Arbor Up. Which I think this card is the more you look at this card, the better you realize this card is. So you summon 2/2/2 Tree Ants. Okay, that doesn't sound that great. Then you give your minions +2/+1. You realize, wait a second. So this card is basically a Savage Roar. It doesn't buff your face though. But then you also summon 2 4/3s. And there's Tree Ant Synergy. And 2 4/3s would already, if there were 5 mana summon 2 4/3s, that would already be a pretty good 5 mana card in Arena. And it also basically it also buffs all your other minions. This card has basically no downside other than, I guess, potential of something like Flame Strike. But it's a Savage Roar that leaves a 6 mana body for 5 mana. This card is just probably very likely the strongest card of the entire set. So, the mini set, I mean. But yeah. Next one. Moving on to Hunter. Bola Shot. Deal 1 damage to a minion and 2 damage to its neighbors. That's interesting. There was a card that was the exact inverse of this. Grievous Bite, which was 2 damage to the primary target and 1 damage to the secondary targets. That was also a Hunter card. This card is probably, I want to say, it's a little more difficult because you can't just use it as 2 mana deal 2 removal. You can't just kill a 3/2 on curve, for example. This card will probably be a little bit worse, I think. But there are some upsides, right? A really obvious one is that you can just snipe a Scorpid with this. So that's great right now, right? And it'll sometimes be extremely good, but sometimes it'll be awkward. So overall, it'll be all right. Probably not the best card you want to look for, but I mean, assuming you can get the full value out of it, it's 2 mana deal 5, right? It's very high potential, so sometimes it'll be the best thing ever. The next card is Saddle Master. After you play a beast, add a random beast to your hand for a 3 mana 3/4. So, I mean, it's a 3 mana 3/4, right? In Arena, it's extremely good. The thing is random beasts generally suck. It is worth noting that one of the sets coming back is Journey to Ungoro, and some of the beasts in that set are actually very good. A bunch of them have poison and stuff, so this might actually be a little better than it feels like it would be right now. That's worth noting, but yeah. Overall, it's obviously it's a 3 mana 3/4, so it's gonna be good. Alright, next one we have is Glacier Racer. 1 mana 1/3, spell burst, deal 3 damage to all frozen enemies. This also works on face. It's worth noting. So you frostbolt your opponent's face, it turns into a fireball. But I mean, this is a card. It's a 1 mana 1/3, so it's gonna be, if you want a defensive card, it's great. And if you have Frost Nova or Blizzard or even Kona Cold, you're just gonna like completely wreck people with it. Overall, probably not going to be that strong, but it'll be one of those cards you just get completely wrecked by somehow. It's gonna be a card that makes you lose to a bunch of these people drafting actual freeze mage in Arena, which you shouldn't be able to do, but now if you get like 3 of these cards, you probably actually can. So, yeah. Oh, and it's stackable, by the way. You can play 2 of these in Frost Nova. Oh, jeez. Well. Okay. Next one is Conjure Mana Biscuit. So I believe it adds a biscuit to your hand, which I believe is a 0 mana card that refreshes 2 mana crystals. And so it's basically an old Innervate. In Arena, this card is pretty much useless. There's some relevance to it. It allows you to play, you know, like a 10 mana turn on turn 8, but not a 10 drop, or it lets you play like a 12 mana turn on turn 10. In Arena, that's just not that important typically, but you know. Yeah, you would generally pick pretty much anything over this in Arena. But this card will see a lot of play in Constructed for sure. Next one is Paladin. Imprisoned Celestial. Dormant for 2 turns. 3 mana 4/5. Spell burst. Give your minions Divine Shield. So this seems pretty crazy because, I mean, you can imagine, like, even if you didn't really have that much else, this thing's a 3 mana 4/5 Divine Shield, assuming you're able to activate it easily, which you should be able to by turn 5, you would imagine. Yeah, it's just, even if you can't, you probably won't be able to get like a whole bunch of proactive value on the Divine Shields, given that you're in the short term wasting 3 mana to play this. But just being able to set up, like, you have like a 1 mana spell and you can set up this plus a 4 mana board, it just seems like it's going to be extremely, extremely good. This probably won't be as oppressive as something like Imprisoned Observer, but it's going to be good. Alright, the next one is Libram of Judgment, which is a 7 mana 5/3 weapon. If you can corrupt it, it gains lifesteal. So the drawback of this card is that, well, let's talk about the upside of this card. It's 15 face damage if you need it to be. So sometimes it will be good for that and nothing else. Although it's a little optimistic that your opponent never blocks it with taunt, but you know, sometimes it happens, right? The other upside is that if you can discount this with Libram synergy, the card becomes extremely easy to corrupt, and then it gains its other upside, which is lifesteal. So then this thing all of a sudden becomes extremely, extremely broken. So overall, I think you're going to be paying mostly full mana and not always getting lifesteal, which makes this card not great, but obviously if you have the appropriate synergies, then this card becomes extremely good. So it is what it is. Next one, Priest Lightsteed, a 4 mana 3/6, which is rated extremely good, and then your healing effects also give affected minions +2 health. There's so many random things that this works with, like including the hero power, that, I mean, it's a pretty good effect. It's going to be a card that you're going to need to kill, and it's 6 health on 4 mana. Even with all the removal that's been added to the game, that's still really hard to deal with on curve. So this seems like it's not going to be the most oppressive card, but it's going to be pretty oppressive and very strong. So yeah, this will be a card that you will lose to sometimes, especially if they have synergy with it. Next one is a legendary Dark Inquisitor Zanesh. 5 mana 3/5. Battle card reduces the cost of all corrupt cards in your hand and deck by 2. So reducing the cost of corrupt cards is especially significant because it makes them easier to corrupt. But just in general in Arena, you don't tend to have that many corrupt cards. So this is probably not a good legendary most of the time. But if you have a million corrupt cards, then all of a sudden this card might be worth thinking about, but usually not going to be very good. Next we have rogue cards, Shenanigans. It's a 2 mana secret. When your opponent draws their second card in a turn, transform it into a banana. I think this card exists or was printed in Constructed specifically to try to just beat tutor cards. The second card in your turn means, you know, if someone tries to pull something like a Galakron out of their deck using the Galakron tutor, like you wreck them, right? But in Arena, I just feel like this isn't very significant. A lot of times it won't even go off at all because some people don't have card draw. And honestly, a banana is better than nothing. And you paid 2 mana and a card to do this, so this card just seems extremely bad. But yeah. The next card is Sparkjoy Cheat. 3 mana, 3/3. Battlecry, if you're holding a secret, cast it and draw a card. Now that makes a useless secret quite a bit better to have. I don't know. I'm not sure that this obviously makes the secret build a little bit better. I still don't know that you're going to want to be drafting a million secrets just because this card exists. It is a rare, so you're not even going to see it that often. But I mean, you know, there's some potential there. It makes a lot of the secret cards, which are really bad in Rogue, slightly less bad. So there's some potential there, but overall still not a super good card most of the time. Next we have Shaman. Now Shaman got some good things here. First one is Landslide. So basically it starts out as an arcane explosion. 2 mana, deal 1 to all enemy minions, but if you're overloaded, deal 1 damage again. So the way you want to see this is, if you're overloaded, this becomes Consecration. You get to deal damage twice, but if you also have spell damage, this is a Flame Strike. So basically, and if you just have spell damage, it's also extremely good. So if you have 1, it's pretty mediocre at its start, but if you have 1 spell damage or overload, it's extremely good. And if you have both, it's completely broken. So yeah, just for its upside, I think this card is going to be a card you're going to pick pretty often. Not always. It's probably not as good as some of the other broken Shaman cards, but this card is extremely good for sure. Speaking of extremely broken Shaman cards, the next one is Mistrunner. 5 mana, 4/4 Battlecry, give a friendly minion +3/+3 with Overload 1. So actually, I mean, this card is definitely good for sure. It's basically a smaller Bone Mare, right? And everyone remembers Bone Mare. Because it's cheaper than Bone Mare, it's probably a little bit better. It's about the same efficiency as Bone Mare. You're paying 6 mana, one of which is Overload. You're getting 7/7 worth of stats. So it's a little bit less initiative, but I mean, this card's definitely good. I don't think it's the most broken card, but it's going to be very strong. It's going to feel very strong, I think, for sure. Alright, moving on to Warlock. We have Backfire. 3 mana, draw 3 cards, deal 3 damage to your hero. I think this is more of a constructed card, because I think the upside of this card comes from, in some decks, the self-damage, but also just increasing hand size and stuff. In Arena, I used to value these cards a little higher, but time and time again, they tend to underperform. Because you'd rather just have cards that you can spend your mana on efficiently. And this card's not bad, it's just like, I would rather, you compare this to like Raise Dead, which is 0 mana, draw 2 cards. I think you would just rather have that. This is just a worse version of that, I think, most of the time. But, you know, it's not unpickable. You'll pick it if it's up against bad cards. And it does get better if you have the next card, which is a legendary, Envoy Rustwix. A 5 mana 5/4, which is not great, but Death Rattle, shuffle 3 random prime legendary minions into your deck. So I guess this, depending on your definition of fun, this is either very fun or very unfun. But it's very fun if you play it and you actually draw the primes, I guess. So, but yeah, it's an interesting card. Primes on average are extremely, extremely good. I think the worst one is the Rogue one, which is a 5 mana 6/5 perma-stealth. That's the worst one, I think. In some decks, maybe Vosh Prime is worse. But yeah, on average, you're probably, assuming you can survive playing a 5 mana 5/4, you'll probably live long enough to see at least one of them, if not all of them. So this card should be pretty good most of the time, I think. But, you know, you just have to praise RNGesus though. Next one, the last class is Warrior. So Warrior got 2 cards. The first one is Spiked Wheel, a 1 mana weapon, which has 3 attack if and only if your hero has armor. I think this card is not, it's not terrible, but it's not great. Like, if you have to hero power twice to activate this thing, it's really not exactly worth it. You would rather have, like, obviously something like Imprison Gnarg or any of the other super premiums, weapon generations like a Sword Eater or something, obviously. But sometimes, I mean, the idea would be you get a bunch of armor up, and then you just get a 1 mana 3/2 weapon. But that just doesn't happen in Arena very often. But there is an armor generation card which we will see very soon, which could make this card a lot better than it would otherwise seem. I'll just show you this one. But anyway, the other warrior card is Ironclad. 3 mana 2/4 if your hero's armor. Another armor synergy card, then gains +2/+2. So the 3 mana 2/4 feels pretty bad right now. But a 3 mana 4/6 is obviously great. It's just like if you were to hero power on 2 to set this up, to get a 4/6 would be pretty good. But the thing is, if your opponent plays, I mean, I guess if they didn't play a 1-drop, if they just respond with a 2-drop, you probably will get this off. So, you know, hero power on 2, play this on 1, hero power on 2, don't use this, and then get a 4/6 on 3. That would be actually pretty good, but we'll see. Because you're essentially getting a 5 mana 4/6, but you're using your early mana. It's not bad, but I don't know. It might be a little too awkward sometimes. Next we will talk about the neutrals. First one is Armor Vendor. One I alluded to earlier, 1 mana 1/3. It's a very good early defensive and even aggressive stat line. Although this is not an aggressive card because it gives 4 armor to each hero, which is something you definitely don't want to do in an aggro deck. But you know, if you know you're a defensive deck, this card is pretty much the best 1-drop you could ever think of. There are other cards that there was like Mistress of Mixtures, which would heal 4 to each hero, but you couldn't use it on turn 1. So this card gets around that downside by providing armor instead. So it's definitely, if you're a defensive deck, this card's extremely good. If you're an aggressive deck, this card is virtually unpickable. Although you would still be willing to play it, honestly, if you had it on turn 1. But, anyway, the next one is Crab Rider, a Rush Wind Fury Murloc for 2 mana. It's a 1/4. This card, honestly, is probably gonna be pretty good. You're probably, if you're playing a class which actually has buffs, you know, this thing's almost like, you know, that Druid legendary. You put this in Paladin, you just buff it, and then all of a sudden you have like a 5/8 Wind Fury for 6 mana or something. It's with Rush, it's extremely good. Honestly, a lot of the time you might just play this on turn 2 and just leave it there and let it live. And if you do have some kind of a buff, obviously the upside goes up. Dude, imagine this card with I just think, imagine this card with Arbor up. That would be pretty good too. But yeah, just it's just gonna be solid. Obviously, you can use it for pings too. This is gonna be an extremely good card, actually. All right, the next one is Death Warden, a 3 mana 2/5 epic. So you won't see it that much, but it's Death Rattles can't trigger. So most of the time, this card probably isn't going to be too impactful. It's just going to be a 3 mana 2/5. You have to be careful not to screw yourself over with it. But occasionally, you can snipe a Proto Drake with this. That will be probably the most relevant thing. Or the Rogue 7-drop also. Yeah, so occasionally this card is going to be something that you just get absolutely memed by. But overall, it's probably not going to do that much, and it might even be awkward to not be counterproductive if you have Death Rattles yourself. But occasionally, it will be extremely good. Alright, let me see. These are the last ones. Yep. So, the legendary Moonfang. 5 mana 6/3, but it can only take 1 damage at a time. So this card, I think, is deceptively strong. Obviously, there's the worst case scenario where it dies to an Arcane Missiles, which will happen sometimes. But generally speaking, you compare this card to like Divine Rager. Divine Rager is one of the best 4-drops in the game actually right now. And this card is for 1 more mana. It has 1 more attack and also 1 extra Divine Shield effectively. And it doesn't get Blood Knighted. And this thing even has the upside where you can buff it. It has a beast tag, so like Druid can buff it with its beast buffs even, or Hunter too. And then this card basically turns into a Rattlegore. So this card is extremely good. This card has the potential to easily win games by itself if your opponent doesn't have either hard removal or a bunch of pings. But yeah, overall, I mean, it's going to be extremely good for sure. Then the last one is Runaway Blackwing, which I should have mentioned in the beginning of this video. there was a card banned from Arena already, and it is this card. This is basically a new Ragnaros. It's a Dragon Ragnaros. 9 mana. At the end of your turn, deal 9 damage to a random enemy minion. So it's a little worse than Ragnaros because, well, usually in Arena you would prefer to go face. You would prefer not to go face the turn you play it. So the fact that it can only hit minions is usually good. But this thing, it's important to note, can also attack, unlike Ragnaros. So if it lives for a turn, next turn it deals 18 damage. It's kind of insane. The reason I did mention it, even though it's banned, is because it is a dragon, and it, as far as I know, it will still be discoverable. So you will actually see this card. It's just you won't be able to draft it. So obviously this card is one of the... This card actually probably, I mean, outside of like old gods and stuff, probably the best win condition in the neutral set in the entire game now. If you can discover it somehow. It will make dragon discovers better, basically. But yeah, card you will hope to not see very often. So, alright, I think that's it. That's my review of the new set. Thanks a lot for hanging out, everyone. I will be recording a video on some of the old cards coming back from the old sets. But yeah, I guess that's all I have to say. Thanks a lot again if you made it this far. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. And comment on any of these cards you think I'm evaluating correctly or incorrectly, or about the color of the sky or whatever else, because comments just help the algorithm, so it's fine. Talk about anything. Without further ado, see you guys next time.